unpause the recording. We're recording this webinar and we will post it on our YouTube channel. And there's the address right there. Again, I'll post that in the chat as well. And we ask people, just like as in all of our webinars, if you can ask a question at any time, but please post that in the chat. We will, once we get to the open discussion part of our forum today, I will go through the questions in order. So please don't hesitate to ask a question at any time, but please put it in the chat. And I see a question, comment there from Heather. I'll get to that in a second, Heather. And with that, I'd like to welcome our speakers today, Jeff Beal, Greg Braun, and Derek Cox. Jeff has been working in our area for 30 years, currently with Ducks Unlimited, but we may know him from people that have worked in the lagoon for a long time, with his work in FWC and also the DEP Aquatic Preserves program. So he's worked on coastal wetland ecology and habitat restoration for a long time in the Indian River Lagoon. And he's going to speak today on some of the work that Ducks Unlimited is doing with regards to watershed restoration. Greg Braun is an ecologist with over 30 years of experience in projects in Florida, the Bahamas, and the Caribbean. He specializes in avian and coastal ecology. And a couple years ago, Greg gave a presentation on the Loxalucy project, which I will paste our webinar recording in the chat when I get a chance. But he's here to provide an update, an overview and an update of that project. And he's currently working under the Loxalucy Headwaters Initiative, working with the Conservation Fund, Treasured Lands, and the Guardians of Martin County. Our other speaker today is Derek Cox. Derek works for the South Florida Water Management District as a senior environmental project manager. And his role is focusing on ecological monitoring and assessment for large-scale restoration projects under CERP, or the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. And to kick us off, John Mayle from Martin County. John is the Environmental Resource Administrator for Martin County, and he's leading county initiatives on ecosystem restoration, water quality enhancement, and sustainable land management. John has been instrumental in developing Martin County's conservation land acquisition and management programs, and all the efforts that the county is doing to protect and preserve our natural resources within the county. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I'll let you guys take it away.
Thank you, Vincent. It's a privilege to be on the panel, and this is a fun topic for us to talk about. I think, did I get this over to you? Are you seeing my presentation?
It's about to, there it is. Okay. Perfect.
Great. And I do have to start with, I appreciate the introduction, but I'm really just the product of a group of really profoundly capable people on this team that do great work, have great ideas, and have a long history of serving Martin County and ecosystem restoration and protection. So I'm going to race through probably more like an hour-long presentation in 8 minutes, and I think that Greg and Derek are going to probably drill down on a couple of my slides in more detail. So I'll be able to cut some of it out there. But I wanted to give a brief history of Martin County's legacy of conservation land acquisition. It's really, I mean, we hear a lot about the Martin County difference, and my personal conviction is that at the heart of that, a foundational element is our conservation land acquisition legacy, and that really starts with more like a metaphysical cultural ethic of ecosystem preservation and land conservation, in the Martin County culture, but that's manifested itself in years and years of a series of commitments from the county and its citizens to tax itself, to partner with other agencies, and in and of itself to acquire large tracts of environmentally sensitive land for conservation. To that end, to date, the county has partnered with other agency partners to acquire over 70,000 acres of public open space for conservation and natural lands. And in addition to that, tens of thousands of acres in preserve area management plan that gets set apart pursuant to proposed unit development orders. And when you put it all together, it really makes Martin County a large green spot in a part of the world where you don't get to see a lot of green due to development pressure. And most of this has been driven by local half-cent sales tax or 1 cent sales tax programs that created the seed money that we get to take to places like the DEP and Florida Forever, or our federal partners on CERP stuff, and say, hey, we want to put our own money into this, and it kind of moves us to the front of the line. So that brings us to last year, November of 2024, the voters yet again passed another sales tax measure that will secure a half-cent sales tax for 10 years to do additional conservation land acquisition, largely in programs that we have had for decades, and it'll just further advance those. The ordinance was tightly conscripted to be used on 4 specific program areas so that the public knew exactly what they were getting from this ballot measure. And I'll briefly run through those 4. Like I said, I'm gonna just gloss over Loxalucy and CERP because Greg and Derek will have better perspectives on that, or drill down on it. But I think the most exciting part of this is it's citizen originated, it's citizen led, and the Department of Revenue estimates that it will produce $223 million for seed money to partner with other agencies for conservation measures. This is one of the program areas is the Indian River Lagoon South project within the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. I'm just going to touch on it briefly again. This was one of I think the only project in all of Everglades restoration that included the natural lands component. And the inspiration for that was that as we build all this infrastructure out to fix the watershed, it has potential to reduce the amount of habitat on the watershed. And so these natural lands will not only serve to be areas for natural area storage and treatment of water, but they also offset some of the gray infrastructure that goes into developing watershed improvements as part of Everglades restoration. We have gotten way out ahead of on this with 20,000+ acres already acquired. And there's about 27,000 additional acre opportunities in this program. And the only thing I would highlight that Derek will probably touch on too is that when we make investments in this program area, not only do we enjoy the benefit of a state partner in funding these, but it goes on the federal 50-50 cost share ledger that constitutes the Everglades Restoration Project. And so $1 spent on natural lands in Western Martin County for IRL South will leverage $1 of federal spending on Everglades restoration somewhere else. So we get a lot of bang for our buck on that. And the one thing I want to point out here in the blown up map of the IRL South program is in the northwest corner, this huge chunk here that's marked tan, which says potential acquisition in the legend, is now green. Thank you to the Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Services securing an agriculture easement with that landowner in December of last year. That was one of our priority areas. It's now off the list, and we're moving our concentration to the east to some of these properties over here. It's exciting. Other program area that we can target our sales tax dollars towards is the Palmar area. we could spend all day on Palmar, but it's essentially a property that's right on the Palm Beach and Martin County line. It kind of surrounds or borders the Hungry Land Wildlife Environmental Area that the FWC manages uh, for preservation and recreation. Martin County has been working with the Water Management District for several decades to protect and acquire interests in this area. It was illegally platted in the 60s and sold all over the country in quarter-acre parcels. And the infrastructure to actually develop it was never built. And so people own land they couldn't access or do anything with. And for decades, we've been buying those back one parcel at a time. We've made some great progress on it recently. We are at about 85% public ownership in this whole area. And the goal is to eventually own most or all of it and have that be incorporated into the Hungry Land Wildlife Environmental Area. It's some of the best wetlands in Martin County. It's super stunning and environmentally sensitive land. This will help us to move the ball forward quite a bit in this area. This illustrates some of the adjacent lands around Palmar, but what specifically we're targeting in here is these little quilted parceled areas. Yeah, look, we think we have about 2,000 parcels still out there to be acquired. Loxalucy, I'm going to totally defer to Greg on that. That is his thunder, and I would not do well to steal it. This is Loxalucy as well. And then the last program area where we can use the sales tax dollars is in the Blue Ways program. Now, these tend to be smaller parcels, more in the urban area to provide water access or water buffers. These are the sites that tend to have the most public use. Places like Delaplane or Kiplinger, beach access like Perry Beach is one that we've acquired before. And then we try to develop low impact recreational access on these sites. And as an example, we've worked with the state to develop this Blue Ways paddling trail that's illustrated on the screen that you're seeing now. Just to try to create some connectivity and some opportunities for low impact paddling access to tie these together and to increase the ability of the public to use that. We've recently acquired some more islands through a partnership with the Audubon and the South Fork that are becoming incorporated into that. And we've already begun several conversations with landowners in these Blue Ways areas to find willing sellers and to create some more access points and preserve more mangrove habitat and some living shoreline opportunities in the Blue Ways. These also tend to be the most expensive per acre. A brief discussion on the process that we've developed for implementing the sales tax. Staff worked with our county attorney's office and developed a manual to guide the process. We have worked with the board to select and nominate an environmental lands oversight committee, which is 9 citizen member committee that will evaluate and rank acquisition opportunities that get nominated to the committee. This slide here kind of shows the flow chart of how that process will be administered. We will also include a nomination form for every property, and everyone on this call has the ability to submit a nomination form. If there's a property you're aware of that you think fits in one of those programs and would somehow move the ball forward for preservation and our conservation goals in the county, that you can work with a landowner and submit a nomination form for the Environmental Lands Oversight Committee to consider. We've gotten lots of these already. We've had some really exciting conversations that are privileged to even be having. This is available on our website as well. And then every property will be evaluated for its environmental significance. We are contracting with the Florida Natural Areas Inventory to have them do that evaluation. So we have a standardized process that the Environmental Lands Oversight Committee can review from a very standardized evaluation. And then the ELOC members or Environmental Lands Oversight Committee will use this ranking form to evaluate properties and to provide some metric to score them. So it includes things like what's the development pressure for that property? How does it incorporate the wildlife corridor or linkages to other natural areas? Does it provide access to water? Does it is it, what's the cost per acre? How efficient is it in conservation? Who could be potential management partners and things of that sort will, as you see on this, will create some kind of standardized weighting evaluation system. And at the end of the day, when the ELOC evaluates and scores these, they will be brought before our board for the final consideration on whether or not to apply a sales tax. In the meantime, your staff at the county will be working tirelessly to leverage those dollars with programs like Florida Forever or NRCS easement programs, or the relatively new Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Services agricultural easement program. We have kind of gone over the map over and over. I call it mock drafts, where we look at where we have some priority areas and who are most likely to be good partners on this, or where do we have overlapping goals. CERP is probably the best one, or Everglades restoration with the district. It's a federally authorized project that the district has agreed to partner with the federal government on. And like I said, the dollars that get allocated to that, one, they don't require lots of engineering and permitting and construction that take years and years. These deals can be done in months rather than years, and it goes on the federal cost share ledger, like we spoke about earlier, and Derek may elaborate on. So in the interest of time and having time for questions later, I'll keep it to that, and I'm going to stop sharing. Did that stop it, Vincent?
Yes,
bored
it
Vincent.
stopped.
Vincent went to sleep.
Great. Thanks, John. And can everybody now see my Loxalucy Headwaters Initiative title slide?
Looks great, Greg.
Okay, great. So thanks for giving that overview. First, you, Vincent, on how we're going to try to tie all these disparate projects together. But also John for that description of the Martin County Forever project. And we're certainly very pleased that Martin County Forever passed by such a great margin by the Martin County voters. And we certainly won't take any credit for that, but I think the fact that our Loxalucy Headwaters project has been going on for several years, and it has been very widely accepted and received by the community, may have led to some of the support for the Martin County Forever initiative. So in my 8 to 10 minutes here, I'm going to go through pretty quickly an overview of our Loxalucy Headwaters initiative. Hopefully some of you have at least heard of this, or perhaps participated in either the field trip that I led out there to the Loxalucy for the Water Ambassadors a couple of years ago, or you tuned in either live or to the recording about the Loxalucy that I did for the Water Ambassadors back in 2021. But I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. Overall, what our project is trying to do is permanently protect the ecological corridor between the northern end of Jonathan Dickinson State Park and the southern boundary of Atlantic Ridge Preserve State Park. So just to give you some context as to what we're talking about, it's certainly smaller geographic scale than what John was describing or that we'll hear from others. But our project is generally bounded by Cove Road on the north, Jonathan Dickinson State Park on the south, the I-95 corridor on the west, and then the sort of bounded by the urbanized areas on just west of US 1 on the east side. Bridge Road is the only kind of significant interference with the water flow in this area. And certainly we've coined the term the Loxalucy headwaters because indeed these are the low-lying wetlands that the southern part of them drain south towards the Loxahatchee River, and the northern part, as you can see from my blue lines here, drain towards the South Fork of the St. Lucie. Well, did my graphic not show up? It's not showing on my screen.
No, it's not showing up.
Oh boy, several of them aren't going to show up then, it looks like. So let me just scroll through a couple of these, and if none of the graphics are going to show up, maybe we'll ask you, Vincent, to pull up the other version of this. Yes, I'm not seeing the graphics show up. Vincent, can you pull up your version of this?
If Vincent doesn't have it, I'm pulling it open right now for you, Greg.
Okay, great. So then what I'll do is stop my share.
Okay, give me 1 second to share mine.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I don't know what the glitch was there, but thanks for helping out with that, Lisa. So my next slide here was to show the Loxalucy project area in relation to an overall heat map of environmentally sensitive areas throughout Martin County. This was done a number of years ago by the North Florida Land Trust as a consultant for this project. So you see the criteria or the parameters that were looked at over on the right-hand side. And certainly the brighter reds and oranges are those areas that are most highly environmentally valuable. So that's part of the reason that we focused on this area, plus the exceedingly high development pressure on the areas east of I-95 in Southeast Florida. Okay, Lisa, can you click to the next slide, or Vincent? One of the other reasons that we selected this as a key project for this consortium, which is the Guardians of Martin County, who I'm representing, the Conservation Fund, and the Treasured Lands Foundation, is many of these properties that are within our project area have been on the state's Florida Forever acquisition list for over 20 years. But exactly 0 acres have been purchased by the state during that period of time. So we went to the state a number of years ago and we said, we'd really like to get these properties on, not just on the list, but we'd like to get them acquired. What can we do to help? And they told us 2 things. Number one, we need to see that there's some local support. So check that box. We've been out on the road giving presentations, and we've got endorsements from a variety of different entities on that. The second thing that they said is, you're at a competitive disadvantage here in Southeast Florida, being on the east side of I-95. The land values are just so exceedingly high in comparison to other areas in the state. What can you do to help us sort of even out the playing field there? So we've been working on a big fundraising campaign, and I'm going to give you an update on that. And as John mentioned, Florida Forever is the state's premier land acquisition program, but unfortunately it has not been funded to the extent in the recent years it had been previously. But what is sort of replacing that is the legislature does seem to be very encouraged by the Florida Wildlife Corridor project. So as I've shown on the right-hand side of this slide, our projects are within that corridor. So that may help us out with some state funding as well. Okay, next slide. Part of the reasons that we're interested in this is just the variety of different habitat types, vegetative communities within this couple thousand acres area that separates the 2 state parks. So we won't go through them all, but Certainly, if you want more details on the ecological features or other things, tune in to that recording when we spent 45 minutes or so on the Loxalucy back in 2021. Next slide. So the title for this panel for the water ambassadors was Land Acquisition and Watershed Restoration. And that's really part of the key of us selecting this as a project. And I'm going to give credit. I saw Bud Howard logging on here to the Loxahatchee River District. I've used several of their maps over on the left-hand side of the slide here. The larger one shows the different watersheds within the Loxahatchee River. And then my yellow oval is our project. So we've got two different sort of sub-basins within the Loxahatchee. There goes into the wild and scenic portion of the river. And so the maps down below that are the water quality parameters that are measured by the Loxahatchee River District. And so as you might expect, the green circles are good and the red ones are not quite so good. So what we're hoping to do through this project is not only acquire the properties, but also improve water quality, both going south into the Loxahatchee, where you see my picture there with one of the big dead cypress being replaced by mangroves due to saltwater intrusion. But then on the right-hand side, you see the similar sort of a water quality map from Florida Oceanographic Society. And unfortunately, the winding south fork of the St. Lucie almost always has some of the worst water quality surface water quality in Martin County. So what we're hoping to do by acquiring and restoring the hydrology in the Loxalucy wetlands is to hopefully help out with this situation as well. Next slide, please. Martin County is well known for having some of the strongest wetland protection standards in the state. So I've got a 1958 aerial of our Loxalucy aerial over in the Loxalucy headwaters area on the left-hand side of the picture, and the complementary slide from just last year over on the right. And you can see the thousands of acres of wetlands that are either no longer present or are in a degraded condition. So that's part of why we have selected this. Is overall, we think through hydrologic restoration, we can indeed restore a lot of those wetlands, whether they're on state-owned lands now or through our acquisition. You can't do the restoration unless you either own the property or have the ability to do restoration based on the property owner's approval. Next slide, please. So what we're working on, we're calling it phase one. You see the criteria here. We're trying to purchase properties that certainly have willing sellers and meet these various criteria. Sort of like a jigsaw puzzle with a variety of properties that are a varying size and value and one thing or another. So we're constantly looking at the for sale signs and working with property owners to see what we can do to bring those into either permanent conservation through acquisition or through conservation and conservation easements, or something that would allow us to do water restoration. Next slide. So this slide shows sort of that jigsaw puzzle of properties and the three that we have acquired so far. The first one was about 2 miles of frontage on the north side of Bridge Road, a smaller parcel, only 20 acres in size, acquisition number two. But we thought that was particularly important because it abuts a parcel that is owned and managed by Martin County. So there's greater restoration potential there. And then the one that we're currently in the fundraising mode for right now is a parcel not right on Bridge Road, but a little bit to the southeast there. And part of our interest in that one when it came available for sale is that it abuts Jonathan Dickinson boundary on the east side of our property. So as we're trying to make this connection, that's what we're trying to do, fill in all those parcels so that we can make that connection. Next slide, please. So just a brief timeline of what we've been working on. The whole initiative started in 2019. and the timing was horrendous from a pandemic perspective. We had to cancel our big kickoff meeting at the beginning and indeed switch over to doing a lot of presentations via Zoom and other platforms. But over the years, we've been successful. We have raised several $1 million. And as you see, we completed the acquisition of our number 2 property in 2023, and we're working on fundraising for that parcel number 3 right now. And we're certainly pleased about the increased potential now that the Martin County voters have approved the Martin County Forever initiative. Next slide. So this is just a list of some of the environmental organizations that have, well, a variety of organizations that have endorsed the project. I've got them listed there in columns for governmental, water quality, and environmental NGOs, and then other organizations, garden clubs and homeowners associations, that sort of thing. So all that is to help us when we go back to the state and show that there is local support for this initiative. Next slide. And just want to close here with the acknowledgments of the team that has been working on this for several years. Again, the Guardians of Martin County, the Treasured Lands Foundation, the local land trust, and the Conservation Fund has been a great ally to this. We're very lucky to have Matt Sexton, the regional vice president for the Southeast U.S. for the Conservation Fund, being not only a longtime resident in Martin County, but also having been engaged with land acquisition things back to the MacArthur Foundation days back years ago. So very knowledgeable. So we got a team of a variety of people with different kinds of insights, and they have all helped us raise over $5 million so far in private donations that we're using for acquiring these properties that hopefully will help us achieve that long-term goal of connecting the 2 state parks. And with that, I think my next slide goes to questions, and we're going to hold that off until the other presenters. So thank you for your interest.
All right, I think I'm up next. So, hi everyone. My name is Derek Cox. I'm with the Ecosystem Restoration Planning Bureau at the South Florida Water Management District. And today I'm going to do a little update on the Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project. Before I get into that, I want to just kind of thank Vincent for inviting me to this and for the format that this is set up in. You know, I think it being that the panel, it really helps kind of illustrate how collaborative this effort is for watershed restoration within Martin County, having all these different groups working towards the same or similar goals, and leveraging their resources and funding and authorities and things like that. So really appreciate the format of how this is set up. All right, so I can change slides here. There we go. So briefly, just wanted to give a quick kind of overview of the Water Management District, who we are, what we do, since we seem to be a little more of a question mark for folks than some of the other agencies tend to be. And so historically, the Water Management District really focused on kind of 2 main things, that, flood protection and water supply. However, more recently, the past couple of decades, we've added some additional areas of focus, including water quality improvement, resiliency, and ecosystem restoration. With that last one, being really key in that hydrology and water is so important to local ecosystems in South Florida. And it's important that the Water Management District plays a key role in that. I've got a map up here showing Martin County and some of the areas that we've got projects going on, completed or planned within this area. And you can see there's a lot of overlap from the map that the multiple maps you've seen before, again highlighting how this is not just any one group doing this effort. It's really a collaborative effort from many groups, many folks. And I hope you can see my mouse, but I'm kind of highlighting the bottom left area of Martin County, southeast corner here. This is where I'm going to be focusing today. Mostly it's the portion of the Lox River project within Martin County, and has some overlap with what Jeff Beal and Ducks Unlimited is a project going on in Cypress Creek. Then also some other work from the county and others kind of in this area as well. And so the district's focus on ecosystem restoration really kind of got catapulted forward with the approval of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan by the Congress in the Water Resource Development Act, WRDA of 2000. For those unaware, this Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, or CERP, is looking to restore Everglades through altering the quantity, quality, timing, and distribution of water into a more natural flow patterns through South Florida. And so Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project is part of CERP, authorized in 2020, so relatively recently. And like other projects, it is a 50-50 partnership and cost share between the state of Florida, represented by the Water Management District, and the federal government by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And so we do have some funding assistance, very good funding assistance through this authorized project. And though it is, this 50-50 partnership between the district and the Corps, there are lots of other agencies, NGOs, public stakeholders involved in any of these projects. A brief background on the Loxahatchee watershed, although many of you are probably already aware, through channelization for flood control and agriculture and subsequent development, we really led to a lot of altered connections in these natural flow paths here between the surrounding natural areas and the river, getting cut off by development and roads, agricultural areas, things like that. And so this resulted in degraded wetland structure and function throughout the watershed, as well as periods of either excessive or insufficient flows to the floodplains, the Lox River, and the estuary, and had obvious negative impacts on the native flora and fauna. So the purpose of the Lox River project is to really improve those flows to the Northwest Fork, which is a nationally designated wild and scenic river, as well as restoring the wetland and watershed hydrology and connectivity for the headwaters of the river. There are lots of objectives here I'm not going to read through, but essentially getting the water right so that things like our local flora and fauna can thrive, and those connections can continue to exist the way they used to. Very high level overview of the authorized plan here. The Lox River project is divided into 3 flowways. Flowway 3 is in the north section here, which is in mostly Martin County, but also a little bit of northern Palm Beach County. And so this section here is really focused on kind of more traditional restoration, getting things like plugging ditches, putting in water control structures, and getting this kind of flow of water across the landscape and into that Northwest Fork there. It's also got a portion up here in Kitchen Creek going through Jonathan Dickinson State Park and also into the river. Flowway 2 is going to be fully comprised of this impoundment here and some aquifer storage and recovery wells. This impoundment's purpose is to retain some of that excessive water during the wet season and then supplement flows during the dry season along C18 and ultimately into the Lox River. Flowway 1 is furthest to the south here, and the purpose of this effort is really to capture some of this excessive water within the Indian Trails Improvement District, and rather than it flowing out to tide, route it up through C18 here up again to the Lox River at appropriate times. So some anticipated benefits of this project, we're looking to see improved watershed wetland hydrology on 17,000 acres of existing or former agricultural lands, as well as 10,000 acres of existing natural areas. Also looking to restore the Northwest Fork of the Loxahatchee River target flows through 91% of the dry season and 98% of the wet season, which would promote the recovery of some of these important freshwater species and estuarine species. Overall, this project should improve or maintain ecological connectivity for 78,000 acres, as well as providing some additional recreational opportunities throughout some of these areas. Now, to make sure this project is accomplishing what it's supposed to within the project plan, we have a hydrometeorological monitoring plan, a water quality monitoring plan, ecological and adaptive management plan. And so kind of in combination, these plans help to make sure we're meeting regulatory and permit requirements, but also identify, what monitoring we need to do in order to assess that the project is working and that we are achieving those goals and objectives mentioned earlier. And then with that information, are there ways that we can improve project performance when possible through adaptive management? Here's a timeline of the project. This is from the integrated delivery schedule, which you can look at in more detail at the link there. But you'll see basically how this is split up is the different components of the project here on the left, and then a timeline here from about 12 years or so. And within this timeline, you have a dotted line representing the design phase of the project, solid line is construction, and that the diamonds are operational testing that follows the completion of construction. And so just wanted to illustrate here, this is first and foremost a very long process. This is, over 10 years after all the authorization and planning portion of the project has been completed. And so we are currently here with everything in design, but starting to look into some construction of some of the features coming soon, with construction starting to wrap up in the early 2030s if everything goes according to schedule, and by the mid 2030s being finished up and having the project fully operational. To get into a little more specifics of kind of what actually is going on with the project currently, within Flowway 3, we've got our survey and geotech complete, and modeling and design is ongoing. And we're looking for this particular flowway to start construction in late 2026 would be one of the first areas where construction actually starts. And currently they've got some vegetation management underway in some of these high impact agricultural areas where this 2 is Gulf Stream East. Then Flowway 2, modeling and design are starting up as well. We did hold a design charrette in September of last year to help kind of kickstart that. And then we do also have vegetation management underway in some key locations within that impoundment area for invasive species. And I've included kind of a conceptual drawing of the impoundment, kind of looking from the southeast corner here. Flowway 1, modeling and design work is upcoming. However, we do have 2 of the main component features, these structures G160 and 161, already built. And so they'll just need to be kind of confirmed that they can operate as planned with the project. And then overall, we're constantly, executing agreements with federal, state, and local partners and continuing to involve and work with stakeholders throughout this process. So a lot of information there. I know I went through it fast, but if you have additional questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to me or check some of the information available on the web. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Derek. Did everyone see my first slide?
Looks good.
Very good, thanks. Well, thanks to Vincent and all the speakers up till now. They really set the stage for the project I'm going to be talking about today, and that is Cypress Creek Project. Again, my name is Jeff Beal, Regional Biologist with Ducks Unlimited in Florida. Very quickly, though, for those unfamiliar, I want to give you a little background on who we are at DU. We were created as an advocate for North American waterfowl populations during a time in which they were plummeting across the continent. We become a world leader in wetland conservation, both acquisition and restoration. We have one of the largest land trusts in the country, Wetlands America Trust, and our largest property is, in fact, in Florida, in the Kissimmee Basin. It was given as a donation. And the project you're going to be looking at today, the funding is federal for this project, and we use some of the land value of that land acquisition project in order to get those funds. That's why this becomes important. We're a team of biologists like myself, and surveyors, engineers, fundraising, research staff, lots of folks worldwide dedicated to our mission, and we use both public and private funding sources. In this case, for this project, it'll be public. Started in 1937 during the Dust Bowl era of our country. There's our mission statement there. We're interested in wetlands, especially waterfowl benefits and all the ecosystem services that they provide. 3 different companies working collaboratively across the continent. We recently celebrated 18 million acres conserved in North America, and you can see some of the projects there on the map, including you'll see some red dots in Florida. We've been working in Florida since the 1980s. And as of last year, conserved over 70,000 acres in Florida, over $20 million worth of projects. And we hope to more than double that acreage number in the next 3 years with lots of projects teed up, including the one we're going to be looking at today, the Cypress Creek RNA Farms wetland restoration. So within this landscape region that we've been discussing today is a project in the headwaters of the Northwest Fork of the locks. And one of the common themes you've heard today is it takes a lot of partners to get projects done. And this is a perfect example of that as well. It's a district-owned property. They've already done a lot of the legwork in preparation for this project. We also have 2 counties involved as well that are partners on it, including funding partners that helped us get the funds necessary to do this project. Zooming into the area, what we discover is there was a farm there near I-95 in the headwaters of the Northwest Fork called RNA Farms, just recently taken out of production. The district allowed a lease on it for a time. It was a pepper farm created many decades ago. And essentially the south end of the farm is your typical row crop, as you can see in the depiction there. And then on the north side of that, in the sort of green cross-section area, was an impoundment, above ground impoundment or AGI, which they could store water to be used on the farm as necessary. And more on that in a bit. You'll see a picture of it, but essentially it's wetlands, impounded wetlands in the middle of that. But the main point here is the farm is in the middle of this hydrologically connected area, as we've been discussing today. There's so many important aspects of this whole region because it's all very flat topography, all very connected. What happens on one parcel can affect parcels around it with long-reaching effects downstream. In this case, you have properties that are co-owned by the district and Martin County, and then also involved would be properties managed by Palm Beach County. Because as we looked at this project initially, we thought it has such wide-ranging effects to other properties. We discussed with Palm Beach County how we might bring them in as well. A couple of pictures of the area, looking at one of the cells of the farm there on the left. And at this point, a couple of years ago, it was planted with sorghum. More on that later. The district did that in preparation for the restoration process. And then there's that north impoundment that I mentioned. So you're standing on the berm, looking past the canal. You're standing on the spoil that used to be in that canal, looking into the impounded area. So the restoration process would be to push what you're standing on into that ditch to restore the sheet flow across that landscape. So quite a bit of earthworks necessary to accomplish that. And here's one of the early iterations from the district of all the features that need to be done there. Number 4 at the top is the impoundment I just mentioned. There's other water control structures, some of which to be replaced or added or taken out, culverts and low water crossings and so forth. And then you'll see within the farm itself, intermixed in the row crop, are some remnant historic wetlands. So the goal will be, of course, to keep those and then create wetlands where they occurred historically. And that's an important aspect of restoration. And this is restoration by purest definition, in that we want to put it back as much as we can the way it was before. And an important aspect of that is looking at historical photographs. As you'll see, historical imagery. Most places in Florida, you can go back to the 1930s or 40s. Very helpful. Although the land may be already impacted to some degree, it's a great starting place for the restoration process. And then another very useful tool is laser imaging. So you're looking at elevation data collected from low-flying aircraft, known as LiDAR. Very useful as we plan for restoration. So here's sort of a general mock-up of the flow as we see it through modeling. And some of the features that will need to be part of this, water control structures, etc. That has all been encapsulated into engineering drawings and that went into the permit applications. So here's a general rendering that the district provided on anticipated habitats there. As you can see, it's a very wet landscape, was historically, and we're going to be putting it back that same way. As with any project, there are challenges. Funding's always difficult to find. For this one, about $3 million of federal money through the NAWCA program. That's North American Wetland Conservation Act. Will be going to this project. Lots of other match, not enough time to go into all of that, but the county, the counties, the district, all providing match in some fashion to get this project done. Permitting always a challenge. Some archaeological resources, for example, timing and logistics of it all. We're ready to get moving. And of course, now it's starting to rain. So some challenges there. And this one was especially unique in that because of the former agricultural practices, there are some toxins to be considered out there in the topsoil, the first 2 feet or so, things like chlordane and so forth. So for that reason, the sorghum was planted and tilled under, several iterations of that, trying to get the carbon capture there. But we will have to deal with that top 2 feet or so of topsoil as we do this restoration, and blending it with clean dirt on site. It's a little more challenging than maybe your average restoration scenario. And whenever you seek funding sources through grants, you have to provide the benefits, and that's often given in acres. And so through the district modeling and the Martin County hydrologic modeling efforts that are going on, we're able to determine how many acres will benefit through this. And so you'll see the farm itself, downstream of that, the flow that goes under 95, and then upstream of that, including the Palm Beach County properties. And we're looking at roughly 3,000 acres in total benefits. Of course, lots of benefits downstream. We're improving water quality and water delivery to the Loxahatchee system. So certainly they go beyond this, but when it comes to our federal funding source, this is what we sold them on, that this would be the benefits. So in general, just finishing up here, we're going to be converting this farm back into natural floodplain habitats. I know you can see many of the benefits there. Nutrient delivery to our systems is obviously really important with so many issues of harmful algal blooms that the lagoon has suffered and so forth. So we're excited to be part of this project. And some of that excitement happened the course of the last few months. We had the team of Martin County and the district out there, including Drew Bartlett, their director of the district there. So we're all very excited about getting this project started. And hopefully there's some time for questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks everybody to Derek, Greg, and John for those great presentations. We do have a few questions in the chat. The first one I'll get to from Heather is she's asking about the ELOC. Does the ELOC also consider conservation easements? And she's asking because the Indian River County Land Acquisition Program had several easements nominated, mostly on ag land, but not exclusively. So is that something that the ELOC considers, some existing conservation easements?
The ordinance that passed in the ballot measure in November does allow for the use of conservation easements, and it does not limit it. So I think in the past, maybe there was like a limit of 10 or 15% of funds could be used on easements, and this iteration did not limit that.
All right, thank you, John. I have got another question from David, and he writes, flooding risk in subdivisions in Palm Beach or Martin County, risk going up or down?
I think this might have been mostly directed towards me since it came in while I was speaking, I believe. But doing these restoration projects, we have to go through and do extensive monitoring of hydrology and other things, as well as detailed modeling of impacts, both general that you're seeing, year to year, or wet years, dry years, but also things like 100-year storm events to ensure that some of the constraints we have, like not increasing the risk of flooding and maintaining water supply, are that we are staying within those bounds and not making either of them worse. So we do look into that and make sure that it's not going in the wrong direction, and always to the benefit.
Great, thanks, Derek. We got another question here in the chat. It's directed toward Greg. It's from Nick Curto, and he was wondering if Halpatioke Park is included in the Atlantic Ridge Preserve for the project you were discussing earlier?
And the answer to that is generally yes. Halpatioke is a joint ownership actually with Martin County and the South Florida Water Management District. And so part of it is managed for true recreation, the ball fields, soccer fields, and all that sort of thing. But the southern part of the property, and John may recall the exact acreage, but my recollection is about 800 acres of that is in natural habitat area. It is managed by Martin County for conservation. And so, yes, it's included in the sort of the northern area into which our Loxalucy Headwaters project would flow into, because the eastern boundary of Halpatioke is the South Fork of the St. Lucie.
Great, thanks, Greg. And speaking to that sort of coordination between, let's say, the government agencies, local governments, and then the organizations such as Ducks Unlimited and the Guardians, the Loxalucy Headwaters Initiative. Once the lands are acquired, what are the agreements moving forward for not only the restoration, but the maintenance of those lands afterwards?
Okay, well, that's a good question, Vincent, and it is certainly going to vary parcel by parcel. So as I mentioned, we've got 3 acquisitions so far under our belt, and probably the ultimate disposition of those properties will be different on each one. The state has told us certainly that they're not interested in managing any of the individual parcels unless we can get that permanent connection up to the existing state parks. So in the optimal boundary component of the unit management plan for both the Atlantic Ridge Preserve State Park and Jonathan Dickinson, the properties that we're trying to acquire are in that optimal boundary. So ultimately, if we can cobble together this full corridor, the state will likely accept those properties from us. The eastern one that we're working on, with it being immediately adjacent to Jonathan Dickinson, that might be one that they would be interested in taking on the management responsibilities. And our 20-acre parcel, our acquisition number 2 over on the west side, because it abuts a larger Martin County project, we're hoping that maybe we'll be able to partner with them to do a watershed restoration project going in through the western flowway to Kitchen Creek.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. Let me see. I thought something. Oh, okay. Oh, so here's a question for John. Again, it's from Nick. He was wondering from your presentation about the land that was being acquired. He lives west of I-95 in the Turnpike near the St. Lucie Locks. And he noted it did not seem that there was a lot of land being acquired there. Is there a reason for that?
So I'm grasping at the leash of language to answer that question. Sorry, Nick. It's really guided by these program areas. And I think probably one of the things that you're noticing is a gap between IRL South and Loxalucy. It's probably the maps that we have, I would say, are somewhat dated in that, particularly on the IRL South acquisition priorities. Those maps are no longer even valid. In the last update to the what we would call the WRDA authorization, I'm sorry, it gets really like bureaucratic, that establishes that project as a federally authorized project. The maps were kind of removed from it, and it was in favor of more like a programmatic objective description. And so the there could be lands in that space that meet those objectives that weren't on previously published maps that we can now include in the conversation for acquisition. And so, we look at the whole thing, and there are probably some smaller parcels in there, but at the end of the day, I think the best answer to that is our program is dependent upon willing sellers. And so if there's a seller in that area that has private property that meets those program objectives, it would be considered.
Cool.
And John,
Thanks, John.
can I interject there real quick and ask a question?
Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. You mentioned the nomination process that's now open for the new acquisition program within the county. Someone who wants to nominate, they don't need to be aware of whether or not the seller is willing, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's ideal when they are, right? If they happen to know the seller and they get some email or letter or some indication that they want to talk to us about a negotiation or potential acquisition, but you don't have to. We'll do that work for them. You can just send in a form, and the staff has an element of vetting on the front end as we prepare it for the ELOC's consideration, and then we'll chase down those, some kind of willing seller documentation.
Cool. Thanks, John. And I notice we are a bit over time. But one of the things I did want to just briefly, if you guys could comment on what can the public do to further these efforts. I noticed you had already answered part of that question, John, by even just mentioning the ELOC. So I'm wondering, what are some other things we can do? We've got a state government agency, local county government, and 2 nonprofits involved in Martin County towards this effort. What is the best way that the people here and throughout the county can assist these efforts?
Well, I'll lead off with that because indeed the agency ships are very big. It takes a long time to turn them. And as we're seeing with water quality situations, it's going to be a long time. We're talking decades before there are measurable improvements in water quality in the whole Indian River Lagoon and Everglades situation. We're making progress a little bit at a time. But indeed, contributing to an initiative like ours, the response time is, I won't say immediate, but it's very, very much shorter than the larger sort of governmental entities. So people are making donations to tax-deductible donations to our initiative in amounts as little as $5 or $20. That money goes directly into acquiring these properties. So that's certainly one thing to do. And as you saw from my endorsement slides, we've gotten endorsements from a number of different governmental and non-governmental organizations. Every one of those endorsements, whether it's a homeowners association, environmental group, governmental group, all those help us when we go to the state to sort of lobby for increasing the Florida Forever project. Right now it's the Atlantic Ridge ecosystem that's been on the state's acquisition list for a number of years. They told us they want to see local support. We're trying our best to get that to them. So if you're interested in a presentation about this sort of thing to your homeowners association or church group or business or whatever it might be, feel free to reach out to me. And with that, I'll turn it over. The others may have some suggestions as well.
Yeah, I have to jump on that because I'm so excited about a recent conversation we had to that end, and not to compete with Greg's great organization or their efficiency with using citizen support, but we actually had a gal approach us about making a contribution to one of our acquisitions that we're pursuing, and it was a very, very significant contribution. And in that conversation, we brought up that even more than the donation itself, to have a citizen standing before the Acquisition Restoration Council and saying, this is important enough to me that I'll reach into my own pocket to help see this through. You just don't see that very often, and it's incredibly powerful in leveraging those state dollars to help with those programs.
Yeah, and I'll kind of just briefly add on a little bit to that, just being involved in, things like public meetings and making folks more aware of the work that we're all doing and why it's important. And then also reaching out to representatives at the local, state, or federal level that can then, support the programs that we're all working through.
Well, all right. So we're a bit over time. So with that, I'll conclude. And thanks again to our speakers, and thanks everybody for attending. And please join us next month for our next Water Ambassador webinar given by Carly Batts. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Vincent.
Thanks, Vincent.